I have the pleasure to talk to Rolando Fuentes. He's the author, co-author of a very interesting paper with a quite cryptic title, The iPhone Effect, the Impact of Dual Technological Disruptions on Electrification. So, Rolando, what is the main message of your paper?
Okay, Matthias, thank you very much for this talk. I think that the main message of this paper is that in order to meet the decarbonization objectives set in the Paris Agreement, you have to electrify more sectors in the economy that they don't use electricity now. So there's this need, but this is happening at the time where the electric power sector is going through a massive transformation, a massive technological disruption. So the paper asked the question of whether these changes might help or hinder this electrification. And we take transportation as an example. So this is an interesting example because transportation as well is going through a massive transformation. And the cryptic title is as follows. We call it the iPhone effect because the iPhone was, we think, so disruptive because it put in one device a telephone, music, and say internet. So it's the combination of these three technologies that made the iPhone so disruptive. So in the electricity sector, you have three technologies that when they are put together, they create these disruptions. So you have solar panels, you have batteries, and you have demand response gadgets. Metering, yes. So by combining these three, households are able to become independent from the grid, or at least use it a lot less. In the transportation sector, it is the combination of three technologies: the mobility as a service, let's call it Uber; electric vehicles, let's call it Tesla; and the automation, let's call it Google. The three of them create the concept of mobility as a service. So it's the combination of technologies. And the paper asked the question of whether by combining these three, from the electricity sector, from the transportation sector, we can create an even greater iPhone effect that leads to the electrification of transportation, and if this power comes from renewable sources, the decarbonization of the transportation. Mm-hmm. So that was the riddle.
I think it's really very convincing the way you present these two transformations in the transportation sector and in the electricity sector. But maybe you can say a few things more. How will the synergy or the coupling, because those are two different rhythms.
Yes.
So how will we make sure that they co-evolve in the same rhythm?
I think the right word is coevolution. So we call it, we try to find if there are some synergies that allows the will of electricity disruption and the will of transportation disruption coincide at some point that create this rebound effect of the electrification of transportation. So you oftentimes it is technological advances leads to supply shocks, where you increase you shift the supply curve to the right, and then you enjoy lower prices, and then there is a rebound effect. The thing here is that while for transportation we think that it is clearly a supply shock, for the electricity sector is not really a supply shock. And the reason is that people install all these new technologies on top of their houses without bearing any consideration to the system as a whole. So this is made on top of the system. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that this is inefficient by definition, but the question leaves some open questions to whether this is also a supply shock. So the paper tries to address this conundrum of what happens if one is a supply shock and the other is not. And so I think we find four synergies that we think that when they're put together will make this wheel speed at the same rhythm. So the first one is the development of batteries. This is very obvious, but the development of batteries allows a household to become independent. Without it, it's impossible. And from the transportation side, it allows electric vehicles to ride longer distances. So that's one. The second one, which I think is more interesting, is that at the end, these technologies will drive both electricity and transportation product to be traded as memberships or subscriptions, and traded in digital platforms. So this creates an open avenue, an open space for horizontal integration of electricity and transportation. And the third one is digitalization. So digitalization becomes a second important, probably more important revenue stream for these companies. So having more data, just becomes more interesting for companies. No? And think about this. If you add all the data that you generate from your electricity consumption with all the data that you generate from the transportation habits, it's maybe 90% of a people's life. No? The fourth aspect is that in electricity there's a shift from national policies to local policies, because the generation and consumption and management of electricity is made in the same place, which is the household. No, transportation, I think it's a better time to say mobility of passengers as a service in cities. So having this same dimension allows some firms to operate, say, with the same transaction cost by when dealing with the stakeholders or local authorities. It's the same understanding.
So here is my next question, because I think you make a very good analysis. It's very systematic but I mean, the more general question is, does that evolution need some help in the form of incentives, public policies, subsidies, I don't know what, regulations? And, as you just say, maybe the relevant entity here is the city, and we don't have regulations there. It's all national. So, and your paper is a bit open on these kind of things. So
thanks for the comment. I think it's spot on. I haven't seen it in that way. I think that the argument here is that there is room for this electrification of transportation by having these synergies, and because decarbonization is something good, then regulators must do something to allow these firms to cooperate or to get all the fruits from these synergies. We haven't thought about the bright side of regulation, how regulators can help this to happen. We thought on the opposite, like the risk of doing this. No, and there's something I think very clear in the paper that says that digitalization allows, again, the supply curve to shift to the right, because with digitalization, you are more able to use your capacity more wisely. You can predict demand more wisely, so it goes to the right. However, it also allows firms to design products that you really, really want and sell it to the price, to the maximum willingness to pay that you want to pay. No? So there's these companies might be eating up a little bit more of the consumer surplus than otherwise. So there's a two-edged sword in this use of digitalization. I promise I will think about ways to look at it in a positive way, but in the positive way of how regulators can make sure that this happens.
No, because, and that would be the last question, because regulation will happen anyway.
Yeah.
So we might as well, and that's the public policy implications of your paper. Yeah. Alert the regulations, then the regulator. If they regulate something, you might as well regulate in favor of a dynamics rather than
that's true.
Slowing it down.
Yes, yes.
So thank you very much, Rolando, for an excellent paper, and we all look forward to reading it.
Thank you very much.